The rain pounded against the windshield as Detective Naomi Carter studied the school that still haunted her dreams, Hillcrest High. 20 years ago, she was the quiet black girl who endured their taunts and fists. Tonight, she walked back in as someone far more dangerous. The bullies who tormented her had no idea the predator they'd just welcomed into their halls. But something will happen next in this story that you would have never imagined. From which country are you enjoying this story? Please make sure to tell us in the comments. As Naomi stepped into the fluorescent-lit hallway, her fingers brushed against the badge hidden beneath her jacket, the same badge that would burn their world to the ground. The first bell rang. Game on.
The rain fell in heavy sheets, pounding against the pavement with a kind of relentless fury that made people hurry their steps and duck their heads. But Naomi Carter stood perfectly still beneath the awning of the corner bodega, watching the water rush in rivulets down the cracked sidewalk. She didn't flinch when a passing car sent a wave of dirty runoff splashing near her boots. Her attention remained fixed on the building across the street, Hillcrest High School. Even through the distortion of the rain, the place looked exactly as she remembered. Same faded red brick. Same chipped concrete steps where generations of students had loitered between classes. Same flickering fluorescent lights glowing behind the smudged windows of the main office. A sharp vibration against her thigh pulled her from the memory. She fished the burner phone from her pocket, reading the single-word message. Asterisk, go time. Asterisk. Naomi exhaled slowly, watching her breath fog in the damp air. 20 years. 20 years since she'd last walked those halls as Naomi Carter, the quiet scholarship kid from the wrong side of town. The girl who kept her head down and her mouth shut. The perfect victim. The phone disappeared back into her pocket as she adjusted the straps of her backpack. Not too tight, not too loose. Just right for quick movement if needed. Her fingers brushed against the hidden compartment where her real credentials lay concealed beneath fall school papers. The weight of her service weapon, carefully secured in its modified holster, pressed reassuringly against the small of her back. She stepped out into the rain. The main office smelled like cheap coffee and industrial cleaner, just as it had 2 decades ago. The same peeling motivational posters clung to the walls. The same ancient clock ticked loudly above the reception desk, still running 5 minutes slow. "Can I help you?" The secretary didn't look up from her computer. Her name tag read, Mrs. Henderson. Naomi remembered her. The woman had been ancient even back then, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "I'm Nia Johnson," Naomi said, keeping her voice light, unremarkable. "Transferring in from Roosevelt." She slid the forged paperwork across the counter. Mrs. Henderson finally looked up, her bifocals catching the fluorescent light as she examined the documents. Something flickered in her expression when she saw Naomi's face. Recognition? No. Just that same vague disapproval all authority figures seem to wear around here. "Welcome to Hillcrest, Miss Johnson," she said, handing back a class schedule and a map. "You'll find all your information here. Any questions?" Naomi smiled. The expression didn't reach her eyes. "No, ma'am. I'm sure I'll figure it out." The first bell rang as she stepped back into the hallway. The corridors hadn't changed. Same scuffed linoleum. Same dented lockers. Same cacophony of slamming doors and shouted conversations bouncing off the cinder-block walls. Naomi moved through the chaos with deliberate slowness, memorizing exits, noting camera placements, marking potential threats. A group of jocks horsing around by the water fountain. A cluster of girls whispering behind their hands. Teachers barking orders. And then she saw them. Mason Reeves leaned against a bank of lockers, his Letterman jacket stretched across shoulders that had filled out since high school. Beside him, Jake Mercer scrolled through his phone while Tyler Dunn held court with some freshman Naomi didn't recognize. And at the center, as always, Vanessa Cole, her honey blonde hair still perfectly styled, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against her crossed arms. They looked older, harder, but their expressions hadn't changed. That same casual cruelty still danced in their eyes as they surveyed their domain. Naomi felt her pulse kick up a notch as she walked past them, close enough to catch Mason's cologne, something expensive and cloying. "Who's the new bitch?" Vanessa's voice carried, sharp as broken glass. Naomi kept walking. "Hey, I'm talking to you. A hand grabbed her arm, spinning her around.
Mason's face loomed inches from hers, his breath warm against her cheek.
You deaf or something? For a heartbeat, Naomi considered breaking his wrist. The move played out perfectly in her mind. Twist, pressure, snap. Instead, she let her eyes go wide, her posture shrinking slightly. Sorry. Didn't hear you. Mason's grin turned predatory. You'll learn to pay attention around here, new girl. His fingers tightened briefly before releasing her. What's your name? Nia. Nia, he repeated, rolling the name around like he was tasting it. You'll want to remember who runs this school, Nia. Naomi held his gaze just a second too long before dropping her eyes. Noted. The warning bell rang. Mason gave her one last look before sauntering off, his crew falling into step behind him. Vanessa shot her a smirk over her shoulder as they disappeared around the corner. Naomi exhaled slowly, rolling her shoulders to release the tension. Her fingers twitched toward her phone before she stopped herself. No reports yet. Not until she had something concrete. She checked her schedule. History with Mr. Grady. Room 214. Time to get to work. The classroom smelled like chalk dust and teenage apathy. Naomi took a seat near the back, her eyes scanning the room as students trickled in. She noted the exits, the blind spots, the positions of potential threats. Old habits. Mason and his crew arrived in a burst of loud conversation, dropping into their usual seats near the front. Mr. Grady, older now, his hair more gray than brown, barely glanced up from his attendance sheet as they disrupted the class. Naomi opened her notebook, doodling absently in the margins as the lesson began. World War II. She could recite this lecture from memory. A folded piece of paper landed on her desk. She unfolded it carefully. Asterisk, meet us behind the gym after school. Unless you're scared. Asterisk. Naomi traced the words with her fingertip, her mouth curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. She glanced up to see Jake watching her from across the room, his expression smug. Perfect. She tucked the note into her pocket and went back to her doodling. A rough sketch of the school's layout took shape beneath her fingers, certain areas marked with small, precise X's. The trap was set. Now she just had to wait for them to spring it. Lunch period found Naomi sitting alone at a corner table in the cafeteria, picking at a limp salad. The noise of hundreds of students eating, laughing, fighting surrounded her, but at her table, there was only silence. She felt the stares, heard the whispers. Asterisk, that's her. Asterisk, asterisk, Mason's pissed. Asterisk, asterisk, heard she mouthed off to Jake. Asterisk. Naomi kept her head down, her posture deliberately non-threatening. The perfect victim. A shadow fell across her tray. Oops. The milk carton hit the floor with a wet splat, white liquid splashing across her shoes. Jake stood over her, his grin all teeth. You gonna cry about it? Naomi looked up slowly. You're going to clean that up. The surrounding tables went quiet. Jake's smile faltered for just a second before he laughed, turning to his friends. Or what, new girl? Naomi stood in one smooth motion, bringing them eye to eye. She kept her voice low, calm. Or I'll make you. For a heartbeat, Jake looked uncertain. Then the bell rang, breaking the moment. He backed away, still grinning, but his eyes had gone wary. Later, freak. Naomi watched him go, then pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly over the keys. Asterisk, phase 1 complete. Subjects engaged. Asterisk. She hit send, then stepped over the spilled milk without a second glance. The game was on. The afternoon passed in a blur of half-remembered classrooms and watchful silence. Naomi moved through her schedule with mechanical precision, noting every camera blind spot, every unmonitored hallway, every potential vulnerability in the school's security. By final bell, the rain had stopped, leaving the air thick with moisture. Naomi took her time packing up, watching from the corner of her eye as Mason's group gathered by the door, their laughter a little too loud, their glances in her direction a little too obvious. She waited until the hallway had mostly cleared before stepping out. The note in her pocket seemed to burn against her thigh as she turned not toward the front doors, but down the corridor leading to the gym. The back exit was propped open with a brick, exactly as she'd expected. Naomi pushed through, stepping out into the damp afternoon. They were waiting for her. Mason leaned against the graffiti-covered wall, his arms crossed. Jake and Tyler flanked him, their postures tense. Vanessa stood slightly apart, her phone in her hand, recording. "Well, look who decided to show," Mason said, pushing off the wall. "Starting to think you were scared." Naomi stopped a few feet away, her hands loose at her sides. "What do you want?" Mason's grin turned sharp. "Just wanted to welcome you properly. See, at Hillcrest we got rules. And new girls? They learn their place." He stepped forward, crowding into her space. Naomi didn't move. "First lesson," Mason said, his breath hot against her face. "You don't talk back to us. You don't look at us. You don't even breathe unless we say so." Naomi tilted her head. "And the second lesson?" Mason's fist came out of nowhere. Or it would have, if Naomi hadn't seen it coming from a mile away. She moved just enough to let the punch sail past her ear, then stepped inside his guard. Her elbow connected with his ribs in a move that looked accidental, but had Mason doubling over with a pained grunt. "Oops," Naomi said, her voice flat. Chaos erupted. Jake lunged first. Naomi sidestepped, using his momentum to send him crashing into the wall. Tyler came next, swinging wild. She caught his wrist, twisted, and had him on his knees before he could blink. Vanessa's scream cut through the scuffle. "What the hell are you?" Naomi looked up, her expression calm. "Your worst nightmare." Mason was back on his feet, his face red with rage. "You're dead, bitch." Naomi smiled. "Try me." The second attack came harder, faster. Mason had clearly been in a few fights, but his moves were sloppy, telegraphed. Naomi let him come, blocking and dodging with minimal effort, letting him wear himself out. When he swung again, she finally retaliated. One sharp strike to the solar plexus. A sweep of the legs. Mason hit the pavement hard. The air knocked from his lungs. Naomi stood over him, her voice low and dangerous. "Lesson 1. Don't mess with people you don't know." She leaned down. "Lesson 2. I'm not the scared little girl you remember, Mason." His eyes went wide. "What?" But Naomi was already walking away, leaving them groaning on the ground. She pulled out her phone, typing quickly. Asterisk, subjects tested. Physical capability confirmed. Proceeding to phase 2. Asterisk. She hit send just as the first shouts came from the school behind her. "Let them come." She was ready. The shouts from the school faded behind her as Naomi turned the corner, her pace quick but controlled. She could hear the distant sound of running footsteps. Teachers, probably, or maybe security. It didn't matter. By the time they reached the back of the gym, she'd be long gone, disappearing into the maze of side streets that surrounded Hillcrest. She ducked into an alley, pressing her back against the cold brick wall as she listened. No one had followed. Good. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Asterisk status. Asterisk. Naomi typed back quickly. Asterisk, initial contact successful. Subjects hostile as expected. Proceeding as planned. Asterisk. She waited a beat, then added, asterisk, they don't recognize me. Asterisk. The reply came fast. Asterisk, keep it that way. Eyes on you. Asterisk. Naomi exhaled, sliding the phone back into her pocket. She could still feel the adrenaline humming under her skin, the ghost of Mason's fist whistling past her ear. He'd gotten sloppy over the years. Back in high school, he'd at least been smart enough to make sure no one could tie the bruises back to him. Now, he threw punches in broad daylight, with witnesses recording. Pathetic, but useful. She pushed off the wall and headed deeper into the alley, her boots splashing through shallow puddles left by the morning rain. The exit spilled out onto a quiet side street, lined with rundown houses and overgrown lawns. Naomi kept her head down as she walked, her mind already working through the next steps. Phase 1 was complete. The bullies had taken the bait. Now it was time to dig deeper. The apartment was a small, anonymous thing on the edge of town. Bare walls, a single window with blinds permanently drawn, a kitchenette that smelled faintly of stale coffee. Naomi locked the door behind her, dropping her backpack onto the rickety table near the window. She pulled out a laptop, flipping it open with one hand while the other tugged her CID badge from its hidden compartment. The gold shield gleamed dully in the dim light. Naomi set it aside and logged in, her fingers flying over the keys. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of encrypted files. She clicked one open, Operation Hillcrest, active case. Photos filled the screen. Mason Reeves, Jake Mercer, Tyler Dunn, Vanessa Cole. Their faces stared back at her, alongside police reports, social media profiles, financial records. Naomi zoomed in on Mason's file. Suspected involvement in local narcotics distribution. Ties to Eastridge crew, see attached. Multiple assault charges, dropped. Her jaw tightened. She'd expected as much. Mason had always been a bully, but now he'd graduated to something worse. She switched tabs, pulling up another file, this one older. Grainy security footage from a gas station near Hillcrest, dated a few months back. The timestamp read 2:37 a.m. Naomi hit play. The footage showed a car pulling up, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. The driver's door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. Mason. He walked around to the trunk, popping it open. Another figure joined him, someone taller, broader, face obscured by a hood. Together, they lifted something out. A duffel bag. Heavy by the way they carried it. Naomi paused the video, zooming in. Not just a duffel bag. A body. The knock at the door came just after midnight. Naomi's hand went to her weapon instantly, her body tensing. She hadn't been expecting company. Another knock. Sharper this time. She moved silently to the door, pressing her eye to the peephole. A figure stood in the dim hallway, tall, broad-shouldered, face hidden beneath a baseball cap. Naomi's fingers tightened around her gun. Then the figure looked up, and the streetlight from the window caught his face. Kai Mercer, Jake's older brother, and the only person who might know the truth about what was really going on at Hillcrest High. Naomi exhaled slowly. Then she unlocked the door. Kai Mercer stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his boots tracking rainwater across the worn linoleum. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, Naomi had her gun leveled at his chest. "Wrong move," she said, voice low. "You don't get to show up unannounced." Kai didn't flinch. He lifted his hand slowly, palms out, but his dark eyes burned with something hotter than fear. "You're the one playing dress-up at my brother's school, CID." The badge clipped to her belt felt suddenly heavier. She'd left it visible on purpose. A warning. "Your brother's mixed up in something ugly," Naomi said, keeping the barrel steady. That video was just the tip of the iceberg. Kai's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "You think I don't know what Mason's become? What he's dragging Jake into?" A car alarm wailed somewhere in the distance, the sound slicing through the tension. Naomi studied Kai's face, the tightness around his eyes, the vein pulsing at his temple. This wasn't an act. She lowered the gun. "Talk." The coffee between them had gone cold by the time Kai finished talking. "Started small," he said, fingers tracing a chip in the table. "Mason's old man owns half the warehouses down by the docks. Perfect for moving product. But the Eastridge crew wanted a bigger cut." Naomi watched the way his thumb kept rubbing at his knuckles, a nervous habit left over from high school. Back then, Kai Mercer had been the star quarterback with a scholarship waiting. Now, his hands told a different story. Scarred, trembling slightly. "And the body," she pressed. Kai's gaze flicked to the paused video still glowing on her laptop. "Carlos Mendez, Eastridge foot soldier." Mason thought he was skimming. His voice dropped to a whisper. "They made Jake watch." The pieces clicked together with brutal clarity. Mason wasn't just dealing. He was grooming. Turning Vanessa into his social infiltrator, Jake and Tyler into his enforcers. Building his own little empire right under the school's nose. Naomi leaned forward. "Why come to me?" For the first time, Kai looked uncertain. He reached into his jacket. Naomi's hand flew back to her weapon. But what he pulled out wasn't a gun. It was a flash drive, the metal casing scratched and worn. "Because this is what got my dad killed," Kai said, setting it down between them. And it's gonna get Jake killed too. The files on the drive opened a door Naomi wasn't ready to walk through. Spreadsheets, shipping manifests, security blueprints, all stamped with the same corporate logo, Reeves Holdings. This isn't just about drugs, she muttered, scrolling through pages of offshore accounts. Kai stood at her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. Mason's dad? He's small time compared to who they answer to. Naomi clicked on a video file dated 2 weeks prior. The timestamp read 03:14 a.m. The footage showed Mason's father in a sleek office, shaking hands with a man whose face sent ice flooding Naomi's veins. Deputy Commissioner Edwin Shaw, her boss's boss. The audio crackled to life. Asterisk, the Hillcrest shipment moves tomorrow. The usual channels. Asterisk. Shaw's reply was crisp. Asterisk, keep your son in line. We can't afford another incident before the election. Asterisk. The screen went dark. Naomi's fingers trembled against the keyboard. This went deeper than high school bullies. This was corruption with a capital C. And she just walked right into the middle of it. The neon sign outside the diner flickered, casting erratic shadows across the booth where Naomi sat with her back to the wall. The coffee in front of her had gone cold 2 hours ago. Across the table, Kai Mercer tapped his fingers restlessly against the laminated menu, his eyes darting to the door every 30 seconds. "You're sure this is the right play?" he muttered, keeping his voice low enough that the elderly couple 3 booths over wouldn't overhear. Naomi didn't answer right away. She was watching the reflection in the diner's greasy window. A black sedan had circled the block twice now. "We don't have a choice," she said finally. "Your brother's in this up to his neck. Either we flip him, or he goes down with the rest of them." Kai's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to respond when the bell above the door jingled. Jake Mercer stood in the doorway, his hood pulled up against the drizzle outside. His eyes swept the diner, lingering for half a second too long on the emergency exit near the bathrooms before landing on his brother. Naomi watched the way his hands clenched at his sides, the way his breathing hitched when he spotted her. This wasn't going to be easy. Jake slid into the booth with the practiced wariness of someone who'd grown up expecting betrayal. Up close, Naomi could see the dark circles under his eyes, the raw knuckles that told stories his mouth wouldn't. "What the hell, Kai?" Jake's voice was all sharp edges. "You bring a cop to family dinner now?" Kai didn't flinch. "She's not here as a cop." Naomi kept her hands visible on the table. "I'm here because your friend Mason is about to get you killed." Jake's laugh was bitter. "You don't know shit." "I know about Carlos Mendez," Naomi said quietly. The color drained from Jake's face. "I know Mason made you watch when they dumped the body," she continued. "I know his dad's moving something big tomorrow night. And I know Deputy Commissioner Shaw is dirty." Jake's knees started bouncing under the table. His eyes flicked to the door again. "You don't understand." "I understand you're scared," Naomi cut in. "But running errands for Mason isn't going to keep you safe forever. That's not how this game works." The silence stretched. Outside, the black sedan rolled past again, slower this time. Jake swallowed hard. "What do you want?" Naomi slid a burner phone across the table. "Everything you know about tomorrow's shipment." The rain had picked up by the time they left the diner. Jake had taken the phone but hadn't promised anything. Naomi watched him disappear around the corner, shoulders hunched against the weather. "He'll come through," Kai said, though his voice lacked conviction. Naomi didn't answer. She was too busy counting the silhouettes in the sedan that had just parked across the street. 2 figures, both male, one smoking a cigarette. "Walk away," she told Kai. "Now." He followed her gaze. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. The first bullet shattered the diner's window as Kai rounded the corner. Naomi was moving before the second shot rang out, her service weapon already in hand as she ducked behind a parked truck. The sedan's engine roared to life, tires screeching against wet pavement as it lurched forward. She counted to 3, then stepped out and fired twice. The sedan's windshield spiderwebbed as the driver jerked the wheel. The car mounted the curb, slamming into a fire hydrant with a metallic shriek. Naomi was running before the airbag finished deploying. The passenger door flew open. A man in a black hoodie stumbled out, one hand clutching a Glock, the other pressed to a bleeding shoulder. Naomi recognized him instantly. Tyler Dunn's older brother, a known Eastridge enforcer. "CID bitch," he spat, raising the Glock. She shot him in the kneecap. His scream echoed down the block as he collapsed. Naomi kicked the Glock away, pressing her boot to his wounded leg to keep him still. "Who sent you?" The man gritted his teeth. Blood seeped between his fingers where he clutched his shoulder. Naomi increased the pressure. Was it Mason? Or his father? A gurgling laugh. "You're dead either way." She leaned down, close enough to smell the nicotine and cheap whiskey on his breath. "Then I've got nothing to lose." The man's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, he looked uncertain. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the night. Naomi straightened, holstering her weapon. "Tell Mason this was his last warning," she said, stepping back. Then she disappeared into the alley just as the first patrol car rounded the corner. The safehouse bathroom light flickered as Naomi examined the graze along her ribs. The bullet had only skimmed her, but the burn still made her hiss as she pressed gauze to the wound. Her phone buzzed on the sink. Unknown number. She opened the text. A single image loaded slowly. A warehouse schematic with a red circle around Dock 17. Tomorrow night, 11 p.m. Underneath, 3 words. Bring backup. J. Asterisk asterisk. Naomi exhaled slowly. Phase 2 was a go. The warehouse district stretched out along the waterfront like a graveyard of industry. Skeletal cranes looming against the bruised purple of twilight. Naomi crouched low behind a rusted shipping container, the salt-tinged wind carrying the stench of fish and diesel fuel. Her ribs still ached where the bullet had grazed her last night, a persistent throb that matched the rhythm of the waves slapping against the pilings below. She adjusted the focus on her binoculars, scanning Dock 17 for the 5th time in as many minutes. Still quiet. Too quiet. The entire area should have been crawling with longshoremen and security, even at this hour. The unnatural stillness set her teeth on edge. Her earpiece crackled to life. North perimeter clear. Kai's voice was taut, the words clipped. She could practically hear his knee bouncing where he was positioned near the access road. "Hold position," Naomi murmured, her lips barely moving. The throat mic picked up the vibration. "Stay sharp." She hadn't wanted him here. Had argued for 3 hours last night about the risks, about protocol, about how having an emotionally compromised civilian on site could blow the entire operation. But Kai had that look in his eyes, the same one she saw in the mirror every morning. The look that said he'd already lost too much to walk away now. A new voice broke through the comms, deeper and calmer. Detective Reyes, the only CID backup she trusted enough for this. "Got movement. East side, near the secondary loading bay." Naomi's pulse kicked up as she swung the binoculars. There, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper shadows near Warehouse B. No, not a shadow. A man in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. He moved with the careful precision of someone who knew where every security camera was pointed. The figure paused near a stack of pallets, checking his watch. After 30 seconds, a black van rolled into view, its headlights off despite the gathering dark. It stopped precisely where the man stood, idling with the quiet hum of an expensive engine. The side door slid open. Mason Reeves stepped out like he was walking onto a red carpet, his blonde hair perfectly styled despite the damp wind. Even from 50 yards away, Naomi could see the arrogant set of his shoulders, the way he adjusted his cufflinks as he surveyed the dock. This wasn't some nervous kid playing gangster. This was someone who'd been groomed for this life. 2 more figures emerged from the van. Jake Mercer moved stiffly, his usual swagger replaced by a tension that made his shoulders hunch. The other boy Naomi didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, with the muscular build of an athlete gone to seed. They began unloading crates from the van, stacking them near the warehouse door with practiced efficiency. The crates weren't large, but both boys handled them like they carried substantial weight. Naomi's fingers tightened around the binoculars. "Reyes, you getting this?" "Clear as day," came the response. "That's our probable cause right there." She watched as Mason pulled out his phone, tapping rapidly before nodding to the hooded man. Money changing hands, almost certainly. The operation was bigger than she'd thought. This wasn't just some high school punk slinging weed in the parking lot. The precision, the professionalism. This had the hallmarks of a well-established pipeline. Her earpiece crackled again. "We moving in?" Kai's voice held an edge she didn't like. "Not yet." Naomi kept her tone even. "We need to see the handoff." Because there would be a handoff. Mason wasn't the end of this chain, just a privileged middleman. The real prize would be whoever came to collect those crates. The minutes stretched, each one heavier than the last. Naomi tracked every movement, every subtle shift in body language. Jake kept glancing toward the access road, his fingers drumming against his thigh. The unknown boy stood unnaturally still, his eyes constantly scanning the perimeter. They were expecting someone. Then the lights went out. Every security light on the dock winked out simultaneously, plunging the area into near-total darkness. Naomi's breath caught as she heard Rhea's curse in her earpiece. "Power cut," she muttered. "They're making their move." A new set of headlights appeared in the distance, approaching fast. Not the cautious roll of the van. This vehicle moved with purpose, eating up the asphalt. As it neared, the shape resolved into a black SUV with tinted windows. The SUV pulled up beside the crates, its engine idling. The passenger window rolled down just enough for a hand to emerge, beckoning Mason forward. This was it. The moment they'd been waiting for. Naomi keyed her mic. "All units go." The takedown happened in a blur of shouted commands and sudden light. CID cruisers roared to life, their high beams flooding the dock with blinding illumination. Uniformed officers poured from every access point, weapons drawn. "Police! Freeze! Hands where we can see them!" Chaos erupted. The unknown boy bolted instantly, sprinting for the water's edge with the desperate speed of someone who knew exactly what was at stake. Reyes took off after him, his longer strides quickly closing the distance. Jake stood frozen, his hands half raised in instinctive surrender. His eyes locked onto something behind Naomi, probably Kai breaking cover despite orders. Mason reacted faster than she'd anticipated. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Jake by the collar, yanking him backward as he pulled a sleek pistol from his waistband. "Back off!" Mason pressed the barrel to Jake's temple, his voice cracking with panic. "I swear to God, I'll do it." The entire dock seemed to hold its breath. Officers hesitated, their weapons trained but unwilling to risk a shot with Jake in the line of fire. Naomi stepped out from behind cover, her own weapon trained on Mason's center mass. "Let him go, Mason. It's over." 4-3 heartbeats. Nothing moved. The only sound was the distant cry of gulls and the lap of water against the pier. Then Jake drove his elbow backward into Mason's ribs. The gun went off with a deafening crack. The world narrowed to a single point, Jake collapsing forward, blood already darkening his sleeve. Mason stumbling back, his face a mask of shock. The gun swinging wildly as officers surged forward. Naomi didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was there, her weapon pressed against Mason's throat as she wrenched the pistol from his hand. "Medic!" she shouted, not taking her eyes off Mason's pale face. "We need a medic now!" Chaos swirled around them. Shouted orders, the wail of approaching ambulances, Reyes cuffing the dark-haired boy near the water's edge. But all Naomi could focus on was the growing stain on Jake's shirt, the way his breath came in ragged gasps as Kai skidded to his knees beside him. "You're okay," Kai was saying, pressing his hands to the wound. His voice shook. "You're gonna be okay." Naomi hauled Mason to his feet, shoving him toward a waiting officer. "Get him out of here." She dropped to Jake's other side, assessing the damage. The bullet had caught him high in the shoulder, painful as hell, but not immediately life-threatening. Still, the amount of blood was concerning. "Pressure here," she told Kai, guiding his hands. "Harder." Sirens grew louder. The first paramedics arrived in a flurry of equipment and shouted questions. Naomi gave them a quick rundown before stepping back to let them work. Reyes appeared at her shoulder, his face grim. "We've got a problem." He led her to the crates, now bathed in the harsh glow of police floodlights. One had been cracked open during the commotion, its contents spilling onto the dock. Not drugs, not weapons, passports, dozens of them, bundles of cash in multiple currencies, and photographs, young faces, mostly girls,
with numbers scrawled on the backs.
Naomi's stomach turned. This isn't a drug operation. Reyes nodded, his mouth a tight line. Human trafficking. And we just interrupted their shipment. The implications hit like a physical blow.
This wasn't just some local corruption. This was a network. One that had clearly been operating for a long time. One that would have contingencies in place when an operation got compromised. Naomi turned back toward the ambulance just in time to see Jake being loaded inside, Kai climbing in after him. The flashing lights painted their faces in alternating red and white, like some macabre strobe. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. The text contained only 4 words.
Asterisk, you should have stayed gone. Asterisk.
Naomi's blood ran cold.
Because suddenly she understood.
This wasn't over.
It was just beginning. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. Naomi sat in the corner, her hands wrapped around a paper cup that had long gone cold. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Across from her, Kai Mercer paced like a caged animal, his sneakers squeaking against the linoleum with every turn.
They said it was clean, he muttered for the 5th time in as many minutes.
The bullet went straight through. No major damage.
Naomi nodded but didn't respond.
Her attention was fixed on the television mounted in the corner, where a local news anchor droned on about an ongoing police operation near the docks.
No details. No mention of Mason Reeves or the crates.
That kind of silence didn't happen by accident. Her phone buzzed in her pocket.
Another unknown number.
She hesitated before opening it. Asterisk, ditch the cop. Library. 30 minutes. Asterisk.
Naomi's fingers tightened around the phone.
This wasn't CID protocol. Not even close. Kai stopped pacing. What?
She stood abruptly, tucking the phone away.
I need to go. Like hell. He blocked her path. Jake's still in surgery. Whatever this is, isn't your concern. She met his glare without blinking. Stay here. Watch your brother. Trust no one. The words hung between them. Kai searched her face, looking for something. Answers, maybe, or just a reason to believe her. Finally, he stepped aside. Naomi was out the door before he could change his mind. The library was a crumbling brick building on the edge of downtown, the kind of place that hadn't seen proper funding in decades. Naomi pushed through the heavy doors, the scent of old paper and dust wrapping around her like a shroud. The main floor was deserted save for a lone librarian shelving books in the history section. Naomi moved past her, climbing the stairs to the second-floor study area. He was waiting at a table in the back, half hidden behind a stack of newspapers. Deputy Commissioner Edwin Shaw looked nothing like his press photos. His usually impeccable suit was rumpled, his salt and pepper hair disheveled. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes. Naomi sat across from him, keeping her hands visible on the table. You've got 5 minutes. Shaw didn't bother with pleasantries. You weren't supposed to be on that dock tonight. Funny. I was just thinking the same about you. A muscle twitched in his jaw. This goes deeper than you know, Carter.
Deeper than Mason Reeves.
Deeper than me.
Naomi leaned forward.
Then enlighten me. Shaw slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photographs. Grainy surveillance shots of men in expensive suits shaking hands in shadowy corners. Politicians. Judges. Businessmen. And standing at the center of every frame, smiling like he owned the world, Senator Richard Reeves. Mason's father. The shipment you interrupted? Shaw's voice dropped to a whisper. That was just the tip of the iceberg. The Reeves family has been moving more than drugs for years. People. Information. Blackmail. You name it. Naomi flipped through the photos, her stomach twisting. And you helped them. I tried to stop them. Shaw's hands shook as he reached for his coffee. That's why they own me now. Outside, a car door slammed. Shaw flinched like he'd been shot. They're coming for you, he said urgently. For me. For everyone connected to this. Naomi stood, tucking the envelope inside her jacket. Then we'd better move. The first bullet shattered the window behind them. Glass rained down as Naomi tackled Shaw behind a study corral. The second shot punched through the drywall where his head had been seconds before. "Stay down," she hissed, drawing her weapon. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Too heavy to be library staff. Naomi risked a glance around the corral. 3 men, all armed, all moving with military precision. Not cops. Not even Reeves' usual hired muscle. Professionals. Shaw was hyperventilating beside her. "They'll make it look like a murder-suicide. You killed me, then yourself. Standard cleanup." Naomi's grip tightened on her gun. Like hell. She rose just enough to send 2 shots toward the staircase. The lead gunman ducked, giving her the split second she needed to grab Shaw's arm and haul him toward the emergency exit. The fire alarm wailed as they burst onto the metal landing. Below them, the alley was empty save for overflowing dumpsters. Naomi shoved Shaw ahead of her. "Run. Don't stop until you're somewhere crowded." "What about you?" She turned back toward the door just as the first gunman shouldered through it. "I'll buy you time." The fight was short and brutal. Naomi used the narrow confines of the stairwell to her advantage, disarming the first man with a well-placed kick to the wrist. The second got a bullet in the thigh. The third, the leader, hesitated just long enough for her to land a solid punch to his throat. By the time she reached the street, Shaw was gone. So was the envelope. Naomi swore under her breath, melting into the lunchtime crowd. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. This time, there was no text. Just an address. And a single word. Asterisk, hurry. Asterisk. The address led Naomi to an abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of the city. The chain-link fence surrounding the property sagged in places. The barbed wire atop it rusted and brittle. A faded "no trespassing" sign hung crookedly from one of the posts, the letters barely legible after years of weathering. Naomi approached from the east side, keeping low to avoid being spotted from the few windows that weren't boarded up. Her ribs ached where the graze wound had started to heal, a dull throb that intensified with each careful step over the uneven ground. She paused near a service entrance, pressing her ear against the metal door. Silence. The handle turned easily in her grip. Too easily. Someone had oiled the hinges recently. The interior was a maze of broken machinery and rotting fabric bolts. Faint daylight filtered through gaps in the boarded windows, creating stripes of illumination across the dusty concrete floor. Naomi moved silently, her weapon drawn but held low at her side. A scrape of shoe against concrete echoed from deeper in the building. Naomi froze. The sound came again, followed by a muffled curse. A voice she recognized. She found him in what must have been the factory's former office space, hunched over a makeshift desk constructed from old pallets. The glow from a laptop screen cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the fresh bruise along his jawline. "You shouldn't be here," Naomi said, keeping her voice just above a whisper. Kai started, nearly knocking over a stack of files before recognizing her. His shoulders sagged in relief. "Jesus. Carter. A little warning next time." Naomi holstered her weapon and moved closer. "Where's Jake?" "Safe house. Reyes is with him." Kai turned the laptop toward her. "You need to see this." The screen displayed a series of encrypted emails between an account labeled RSS Holdings and several offshore addresses. Dates going back 6 years. Payment amounts in the millions. And attached to the most recent message, a scanned document bearing the official seal of the State Department. Naomi scrolled through, her stomach tightening with each new page. "This can't be real." "Oh, it's real." Kai pulled another file from the stack. Senator Reeves didn't just know about the trafficking. He orchestrated it, used his diplomatic contacts to move people across borders under the guise of cultural exchange programs. Naomi examined the document in Kai's hand. A passenger manifest for a private jet dated 3 months prior. 20 names, all female, ages ranging from 16 to 24. Next to each, a code number matching those on the photographs from the dock. "Where did you get this?" Kai's expression darkened. Jake remembered something after surgery. Mason used to brag about his dad's special projects. Said they had friends in every agency who could make problems disappear. He tapped one of the printouts, including Detective Markham from Organized Crime. Naomi's breath caught. Markham had been her first mentor in CID.
That's not possible. Check the dates. Kai pulled up another file. Every time Markham closed a case on Reeves' competitors, another shipment went through within the week. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The reason no investigation had ever touched the Reeves family. The way evidence always seemed to disappear. They didn't just have law enforcement in their pockets. They had cultivated assets at every level. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside. Naomi's hand went to her weapon as Kai snapped the laptop shut. They waited in tense silence, barely breathing. The sound didn't come again. "We need to move," Naomi murmured. "This is too exposed." Kai nodded, gathering the files into a duffel bag. "There's more. The senator's hosting a fundraiser tomorrow night at the estate. Half the city's power players will be there." Naomi understood immediately, including his partners. And all their records. Kai zipped the bag with finality. "Jake says Mason bragged about a vault in the study. Paper trails and blackmail material. Insurance against betrayal." The weight of what they were considering settled over them. Breaking into a senator's home during a high-profile event. With no backup. No official sanction. Naomi met Kai's gaze. "You know what happens if we're caught." His jaw set. "I know what happens if we don't try." Outside, an engine turned over. Not the smooth purr of a modern vehicle, the ragged growl of an older model truck. The same sound Naomi had heard circling the library before the shooting started. They were out of time. Naomi took half the files and moved to the opposite door. Separate routes. Meet at the safe house in 2 hours. Kai hesitated. "If I don't show, don't be late." Naomi slipped into the hallway before he could finish. The factory's back exit opened onto a loading dock overlooking a weed-choked parking lot. Naomi scanned the area before moving, her fingers brushing against the grip of her weapon. The truck was parked near the main gate, its engine idling. 2 figures stood beside it, their postures relaxed but alert. Not the same men from the library. These wore the uniforms of city maintenance workers, complete with reflective vests and hard hats. Too clean. Too professional. Naomi retreated into the shadows, circling toward the northern fence line where the chain link had pulled away from its posts. She could hear voices now, carried on the wind. Said both of them would be here. Check again. He wants this handled before the event. Naomi didn't wait to hear more. She slipped through the gap in the fence, keeping low as she moved through the tall grass bordering the property. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to move slowly, carefully. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She didn't dare check it until she'd put 3 blocks between herself and the factory. The message was from an encrypted number. Asterisk, they have Shaw. Don't trust anyone. Asterisk. Naomi stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly as her pulse pounded in her ears. If Shaw had been taken, everything he knew, every name, every location, was compromised, including the safe house where Jake was recovering. She broke into a run. The safe house was a nondescript duplex in a quiet residential neighborhood, the kind of place where neighbors kept to themselves and no one asked questions. Naomi approached from the alley, her weapon drawn as she scanned for signs of disturbance. Nothing seemed out of place. The curtains were drawn just as she'd left them. The flower pot on the front step still sat at its usual angle, the hidden camera inside providing a clear view of anyone approaching the door. Naomi keyed in the security code with one hand while keeping her gun trained on the street behind her. The lock disengaged with a quiet click. The smell hit her first. Copper and gunpowder. The lock disengaged with a quiet click. The living room was a war zone. Overturned furniture. Bullet holes in the drywall. And in the center of it all, Reyes lay sprawled on his back, his service weapon still clutched in his stiff fingers. 2 entry wounds to the chest. Execution style. Naomi stepped over the bloodstains, moving methodically through the house. Every room told the same story. A professional, systematic search. Drawers emptied. Floorboards pried up. Even the refrigerator had been pulled away from the wall. No sign of Jake. The bathroom door was locked from the inside. Naomi braced herself before kicking it open. Empty. The mirror above the sink had been used as a message board, the words scrawled in what looked like lipstick. Asterisk, looking for someone? Asterisk. Below it, an address. The Reeves estate. Naomi's phone buzzed. Another encrypted message, this time with an attached image. Jake, bound to a chair in what appeared to be a wine cellar. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. The timestamp in the corner showed the photo had been taken 20 minutes earlier. The text read, asterisk, come alone. Or the next photo goes to his brother in pieces. Asterisk. Naomi stared at the image until her vision blurred. Every instinct, every hour of training screamed at her to call for backup, to follow procedure. But procedure had gotten Reyes killed. Procedure had allowed the Reeves family to operate with impunity for years. She typed a single response, asterisk, I'm coming. Asterisk. Then she removed the battery from her phone and crushed the SIM card under her heel. The drive to the Reeves estate took 40 minutes. Naomi used the time to prepare, running through every possible scenario. The fundraiser wouldn't start for another 12 hours, which meant minimal security. Just enough personnel to guard a prisoner. She parked a mile out and approached through the woods bordering the property. The estate loomed ahead, its Gothic architecture lit by strategically placed spotlights. Naomi counted 3 guards patrolling the grounds, all armed, all moving with military precision. Not private security. Contractors. She waited for the patrol to pass before scaling the garden wall. The stone was rough under her fingers, the mortar crumbling in places. Naomi hauled herself onto the ledge and dropped silently into a hedge of manicured boxwoods. The cellar entrance was where she expected, a heavy wooden door set into the foundation near the kitchen gardens. The lock was new, a high-end electronic model that would have stumped most intruders. Naomi pulled a slim device from her pocket and pressed it against the keypad. The screen flickered as the decryption software did its work. 5 seconds. Then, the lock disengaged with a quiet beep. The cellar stairs descended into near-total darkness. Naomi moved by feel, her free hand brushing against the damp stone wall. The air grew cooler as she descended, carrying the faint scent of wine and something sharper. Fear sweat. At the base of the stairs, a sliver of light outlined a heavy oak door. Voices filtered through, 2, maybe 3 men. The cadence of professionals waiting for orders. Naomi took a steadying breath and turned the handle. The door swung open to reveal a scene straight out of her nightmares. Jake slumped in a chair at the center of the room, his arms secured behind him with zip ties. Standing over him, a syringe in one gloved hand, was Senator Richard Reeves himself. He looked up as Naomi entered, his smile chilling in its familiarity. Detective Carter. We've been expecting you. The door slammed shut behind her. The cellar was larger than Naomi had anticipated, the stone walls lined with wine racks that stretched from floor to ceiling. The air smelled of oak barrels and damp earth, undercut by the acrid tang of sweat and fear. Jake lifted his head weakly as she entered, his one good eye widening in alarm. Trap, he croaked, his voice raw. Senator Reeves set the syringe down on a small table beside him, his movements deliberate. He was taller in person than he appeared in press photos, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. The tailored suit he wore probably cost more than Naomi made in a month. I must admit, Reeves said, adjusting his cufflinks, I expected you to come through the front gate. Dramatic last stand and all that. Naomi kept her weapon trained on him, her finger resting lightly against the trigger. Step away from him. Reeves chuckled, the sound rich and warm like he was at a cocktail party instead of a hostage situation. Oh, I don't think so. He nodded toward the shadows behind Naomi. She sensed the movement a second too late. The blow came from her left, a sharp crack against her wrist that sent her gun skittering across the stone floor. Naomi spun, catching a glimpse of a black-clad figure before another strike connected with her ribs, right over the healing graze wound. Pain exploded through her side as she hit the ground, the breath driven from her lungs. Rough hands yanked her arms behind her back, securing them with plastic ties that bit into her skin. Reeves crouched in front of her, his polished shoes inches from her face. You've caused me a great deal of trouble, Detective. Naomi forced herself to breathe through the pain. You haven't seen trouble yet. The senator sighed and stood, brushing imaginary dust from his trousers. Bring them both upstairs. We'll finish this in my study. The guards hauled Naomi to her feet, their grip unrelenting as they marched her up the narrow servant staircase. Jake stumbled behind them, his breathing ragged. The stairs opened into a lavish kitchen, all marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Through the windows, Naomi could see the first hints of dawn coloring the sky. The fundraiser wasn't for hours, which meant they had the estate to themselves. The study was exactly what she expected. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, shelves lined with leather-bound books that had probably never been read. A massive oil portrait of the Reeves family dominated one wall, their perfect smiles frozen in time. The guards forced Naomi into a chair opposite the desk, securing her ankles to the legs with more zip ties. Jake was dumped unceremoniously on the floor beside her, his bound hands making it impossible to catch himself. He hit the ground with a grunt of pain. Reeves took his time settling behind the desk, pouring himself a drink from a crystal decanter. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it thoughtfully. "You know," he said after a long sip, "this could have been avoided. If young Jake here had kept his mouth shut. If you'd stayed out of matters that don't concern you." Naomi tested her restraints subtly. Too tight to slip. Human trafficking concerns everyone. The senator's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Such a crude term. We prefer talent redistribution." Jake made a choked sound of disgust. Reeves ignored him, opening a drawer and withdrawing a sleek black handgun. He set it on the desk with deliberate care. The problem with idealism, detective, is that it's terribly inconvenient. Naomi kept her eyes on the weapon. "You won't get away with this. Too many people know." "Oh, I think I will." Reeves leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. By noon, the news will report that rogue CID detective Naomi Carter kidnapped an injured teenager from protective custody, that you murdered your own partner in cold blood, that when cornered here tonight, you took young Jacob's life before turning the gun on yourself. Jake made a strangled noise. Reeves sat back, satisfied. Tragic, really. But these things happen when unstable individuals are given too much authority. Naomi's mind raced. The setup was airtight. Reyes dead, Jake missing, her own history of butting heads with command. No one would question it. The senator checked his watch. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a fundraiser to prepare for." "Gentlemen." The guards stepped forward. One produced a knife, the blade catching the light as he moved toward Jake. Naomi tensed. This was it. No backup, no escape. Then the window exploded. Shards of glass rained down as a dark figure swung through the shattered window, landing in a crouch amidst the wreckage. Reeves barely had time to register the intrusion before the newcomer straightened, revealing a face Naomi hadn't seen since the library. Oh, but this wasn't the broken man from earlier. Blood streaked the deputy commissioner's face from a gash above his eyebrow. His suit jacket was torn, and he held a service weapon with the steady confidence of someone who'd used it before. The guards reacted instantly, reaching for their own weapons. Shaw fired twice, precise shots that dropped both men before they could clear their holsters. Reeves scrambled backward, his chair toppling as he grabbed for the gun on his desk. Shaw kicked it out of reach, planting his foot on the senator's chest to pin him to the floor. "Don't," Shaw warned, pressing the barrel of his gun to Reeves' forehead. Naomi stared, her pulse roaring in her ears. "You were taken." Shaw's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I got better." Jake groaned from the floor, struggling against his bonds. Shaw kept his weapon trained on Reeves as he tossed Naomi a pocket knife. "Cut him loose." The blade made quick work of the zip ties. Naomi rubbed feeling back into her wrists before freeing Jake, who immediately scooted away from Reeves like the man might contaminate him. Shaw didn't take his eyes off the senator. "The vault. Where is it?" Reeves' lip curled. "Go to hell." Shaw pressed the gun harder. "Wrong answer." Naomi stood, her legs protesting after being restrained. She moved to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines until she found what she was looking for. A leather-bound volume that didn't budge when she pulled. "Here." Shaw nodded without looking. "Pull it to the right." The book slid smoothly on hidden hinges, revealing a keypad. Naomi glanced at Shaw. "Try 0927, Jake croaked from the floor. "Mason's birthday." The keypad beeped its acceptance. With a quiet hum, a section of the bookshelf swung inward, revealing a hidden room. Inside was every corrupt politician's worst nightmare. File cabinets stuffed with documents,
hard drives stacked neatly on shelves, and a large safe that probably held the most damning evidence of all. Reeves made a strangled sound. "You don't understand what you're doing." Shaw finally looked away from the senator, meeting Naomi's eyes. "Take what you need. It's over." Naomi didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed an empty briefcase from the desk and began filling it. Hard drives, folders marked with names she recognized from CID's most wanted lists, even a leather-bound ledger that detailed payments going back years. Outside, the first sirens wailed in the distance. Shaw exhaled sharply. "That's our cue." Jake had managed to stand, though he leaned heavily against the desk. "What about him?" He nodded to Reeves. Shaw's expression hardened. "Justice will handle him." The sirens grew louder. Naomi slung the briefcase's strap over her shoulder and moved to help Jake toward the broken window. Shaw followed, keeping his weapon trained on Reeves until the last possible moment. As they climbed out into the dawn light, the sound of screeching tires and shouted orders filled the air. Police cruisers swarmed the estate's front gates, their lights painting the manicured lawns in flashes of blue and red. Shaw led them around the back of the house, through hedges and across a service road where a nondescript van waited, its engine running. Kai sat behind the wheel, his face pale with relief when he saw Jake. "Thank God." Naomi helped Jake into the back before turning to Shaw. "What now?" The deputy commissioner looked older than his years in the morning light. "Now we burn it all down." The van pulled away just as the first news helicopters appeared on the horizon. The van rattled down back roads, taking corners too fast as Kai navigated without headlights. In the back, Jake slumped against the window, his breathing shallow but steady. Naomi kept pressure on the worst of his injuries with a makeshift bandage torn from the van's emergency kit. Shaw sat up front, his bloody hands steady as he scrolled through files on one of the stolen hard drives using a laptop powered by the van's cigarette lighter. Every few minutes, he'd murmur a name or date that made his jaw tighten further. "They had judges," he said finally, voice hoarse. 3 on the appellate court. 2 state Supreme Court justices. He turned the screen to show Naomi a video still of a robed figure accepting a briefcase from Mason Reeves. "This goes all the way to the governor's office." Naomi's stomach turned. How many people did they own? Enough to make sure no investigation ever got close. Shaw snapped the laptop shut. Until now. The van hit a pothole, jostling Jake awake with a pained groan. Kai's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "We need to get him to a doctor." "No hospitals," Shaw said immediately. "They'll be watching every ER within 50 miles. Naomi checked Jake's pulse. Too fast but strong. There's a retired CID medic in Brookfield. Off-grid. No records. Shaw nodded. "Do it." Kai changed course without comment, taking a series of turns that eventually led them onto a county highway heading north. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the road. Naomi watched the landscape blur past, her mind racing. The hard drives contained enough evidence to bring down dozens of powerful people, if they could get it to the right hands. But who could they trust? As if reading her thoughts, Shaw pulled a burner phone from his pocket. "I have a contact at the FBI's Anti-Corruption Task Force. She's clean." "You're sure?" Naomi asked. Shaw's smile was grim. "She's the one who helped me escape." He dialed from memory, putting the call on speaker. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered. "This line isn't secure." "Neither is the governor's office," Shaw replied. A pause. Then quieter. "You're alive." "Barely. I'm sending you a package." "Eyes only." "Understood." The line went dead. Shaw exhaled slowly, his shoulders slumping for the first time since the library. "It's done." The van fell silent save for the hum of the engine and Jake's labored breathing. Naomi watched the sunrise through the window, the colors bleeding across the sky like a fresh bruise. They'd won. So why did it feel like the fight was just beginning? The safe house was a cabin so deep in the woods that the last mile of road wasn't on any map. Dr. Ruiz met them at the door, her silver braid swinging as she ushered Jake inside without questions. Naomi stood guard on the porch while Shaw and Kai carried Jake to the makeshift medical bay in the back. The morning air was crisp with the promise of autumn, the trees just beginning to turn at the edges. Kai emerged after 20 minutes, his hands scrubbed raw.
Ruiz says he'll live. His voice cracked. Bastards broke 2 ribs. Naomi didn't respond. Her attention was fixed on the burner phone in her hand, where news alerts were pouring in. Senator Reeves in custody. CID Deputy Commissioner Shaw wanted for questioning. Citywide manhunt underway. Kai peered over her shoulder. They're calling Shaw a fugitive? And me a murderer. Naomi showed him the next alert. Her own CID photo beneath the words armed and dangerous. Shaw stepped onto the porch, his face haggard. Standard procedure. Reeves' people are controlling the narrative until the FBI moves in. Naomi pocketed the phone. How long? 24 hours. Maybe less. Shaw ran a hand through his graying hair. You should both get some rest. Kai shook his head. I'm staying with Jake. Shaw didn't argue, just nodded and disappeared back inside. Naomi remained on the porch, watching the tree line. The woods were too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves. Just the distant hum of a plane overhead. Her hand drifted to her weapon. The first gunshot took out the porch light. Naomi hit the deck as splinters rained down from where the bullet had impacted. Contact, she shouted, rolling behind a support beam just as a second shot punched through the cabin's front window. Kai dove inside, slamming the door behind him. Shaw appeared in the doorway seconds later, weapon drawn. How many? He demanded, crouching beside Naomi. At least 2 shooters. Northeast tree line. Naomi risked a glance around the beam. A flicker of movement near the woodpile. 3 o'clock. Shaw fired twice. A yelp of pain answered. The woods erupted with gunfire. Bullets peppered the cabin's siding, shattering windows. From inside, Dr. Ruiz shouted something Naomi couldn't make out over the gunfire. Shaw pressed his back against the wall. Contractors. Reeves must have sent them as insurance. Naomi ejected her nearly spent magazine and slapped in a fresh one. We can't hold them off forever. Don't need to. Shaw checked his watch. My contact's en route with a team. ETA 15 minutes. Another volley of gunfire forced them down. Naomi's ears rang from the close impacts. We won't last 15 minutes. Shaw met her eyes. Then we make our stand. The cabin's back door burst open. Kai emerged, dragging Jake by the arm. Both were bleeding, Kai from a gash on his forehead, Jake from his reopened wounds. Ruiz is hit, Kai gasped. We need to move. Naomi and Shaw exchanged a glance. No words needed. They moved as one, Shaw laying down covering fire while Naomi helped Kai with Jake. The tree line was 30 yards of open ground. 30 yards of hell. They ran. Bullets kicked up dirt at their heels. Something hot grazed Naomi's arm, but she didn't slow. The wood swallowed them, the underbrush tearing at their clothes as they crashed through. Behind them, the cabin burned. The headlines told the story in pieces. Senator Reeves indicted on 47 counts. CID cleans house, 12 officers arrested. Human trafficking ring dismantled. Naomi watched the news coverage from a safe house in another state, her fingers tracing the healing wound on her arm. The screen showed perp walks and press conferences, but none of the faces were hers or Shaw's. They'd been erased from the narrative. Ghosts in the machine. The door opened behind her. Shaw entered, his beard grown out and his hair dyed black. He tossed a set of car keys on the table. New identities. New lives. He nodded to the TV. You did good, Carter. Naomi turned off the screen. It's not enough. It never is. Shaw handed her a file folder. But there's always more work to do. Naomi opened it. Inside were surveillance photos of a new crop of smiling politicians, their hands shaking with men whose faces she recognized from Interpol alerts. She closed the folder. Some fights never ended, and neither would she. The safe house smelled of fresh paint and new carpet, the chemical scent of new construction lingering in the air despite the open windows. Naomi sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the edge of a manila envelope containing her new identity. The documents inside were flawless: birth certificate, social security card, passport, even a library card, all bearing the name Lena Dawson. A 28-year-old paralegal from Des Moines with no criminal record and no outstanding debts. A ghost. Across from her, Shaw stirred his coffee absently, the steam curling around his face. The black hair dye made him look younger, though the shadows under his eyes betrayed the exhaustion they all felt. His new identity, Michael Graves ***, lay on the table beside his untouched breakfast. "You don't have to do this," he said finally, setting the spoon down with a quiet clink. Naomi didn't answer immediately. Outside the window, rain pattered against the glass, distorting the view of the city skyline beyond. Somewhere out there, Mason Reeves sat in a maximum security cell awaiting trial. His father's empire lay in ruins, his political allies scrambling to distance themselves. The FBI had arrested 12 high-ranking officials in the past week alone. The headlines called it the biggest corruption scandal in state history. But the victory felt hollow. Naomi opened the folder of surveillance photos Vasquez had given them before they'd parted ways. The images showed smiling faces at charity galas and golf tournaments, men and women who had escaped the initial sweep. "There are still names on this list," she said, tapping the folder. "People who got away." Shaw exhaled through his nose. "The FBI will handle it." Naomi met his gaze. They both knew the truth. The system couldn't be trusted to clean up its own mess. Not entirely. A knock at the door interrupted them. Naomi's hand went to her weapon out of habit, but Shaw shook his head. "It's them." Kai entered first, his once short hair now grown out and dyed auburn. Jake followed, moving stiffly but without the pained grimace he'd worn for weeks after the shooting. Both carried duffel bags slung over their shoulders, their few possessions packed hastily before leaving the last safe house. "You sure about this?" Kai asked, dropping his bag by the couch. Naomi nodded. "We're splitting up. Less risk that way." Jake hesitated near the doorway, his eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. At 17, he'd seen more violence than most people did in a lifetime. The scars, both physical and mental, would take years to heal. "They really giving us new lives?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Shaw pushed a second envelope across the table. "As of today, you're Ryan and Evan Carter, brothers from Ohio." Kai, now Ryan, picked up the envelope, flipping through the contents with a frown. Birth certificates, school records, even a faded family photo showing 2 boys at a county fair. The forgeries were impeccable. "What about you two?" he asked, looking between Naomi and Shaw. Naomi stood, collecting her own bag from beside the chair. "We disappear." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. They'd been through hell together, firefights and betrayals, narrow escapes and sleepless nights. And now they were supposed to walk away like strangers. Kai cleared his throat. "If you ever need backup..." "Don't," Shaw interrupted gently. "The whole point is to sever ties. No contact. No paper trail." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "So this is it?" Naomi studied their faces. Kai's stubborn jaw, Jake's haunted eyes. They were just kids, really. Kids who'd been thrust into a war they never asked for. "It's better this way," she said, though the words tasted like ash in her mouth. Shaw stood, collecting his own belongings. "There's a car out back. It'll take you to the train station. From there, you're on your own." Kai hesitated, then extended his hand. "Thank you. For everything." Shaw shook it firmly. "Stay out of trouble." Jake surprised them all by pulling Naomi into a quick, awkward hug. "Take care of yourself," he mumbled into her shoulder. Naomi stiffened at first. Physical contact had never been her forte, but after a moment, she returned the embrace. "You too, kid." And just like that, it was over. Naomi watched from the window as Kai and Jake climbed into the waiting sedan, their silhouettes blurred by the rain-streaked glass. The car pulled away, taillights disappearing around the corner. Shaw exhaled heavily. "We should move too. Vasquez said they'd have our transport ready by noon." Naomi didn't respond immediately. Her fingers traced the edge of the surveillance photos again, the smiling faces, the untouchable elite. "You really think we're done?" she asked finally. Shaw followed her gaze to the photos. "No," he admitted, "but we've done what we can for now." Naomi nodded slowly. She tucked the photos into her bag, not to study, not to act on, just to remember. The ghosts would always be with her. The bus station was crowded for a Tuesday afternoon, filled with the usual mix of travelers and transients. Naomi kept her head down as she moved through the throng, her backpack heavy with the few possessions she'd allowed herself to keep. A change of clothes. A fake ID. The photo of her mother she'd carried since childhood. She bought a ticket for Albuquerque with cash, choosing a window seat near the back. The engine rumbled to life beneath her as the bus pulled out of the station, the city skyline shrinking in the distance. Her phone buzzed. A new message from a blocked number. Asterisk, check your bag. Asterisk. Naomi frowned but complied, unzipping the front pocket of her backpack. Her fingers brushed against something that hadn't been there before. A small USB drive and a slip of paper with an address in Denver. She plugged the drive into her phone. A single file appeared. A surveillance photo of a man in an expensive suit exiting a private jet. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. At the bottom of the image, a note. Asterisk, he wasn't on the list. Asterisk. Naomi stared at the face on the screen. She didn't recognize him, but she would. The bus rolled on, carrying her toward the next fight. Denver was colder than she expected. Naomi pulled her jacket tighter as she exited the train station, her breath fogging in the evening air. The address on the slip of paper led her to a mid-range hotel near the business district, the kind of place frequented by traveling salesmen and affair-having middle managers. She took the stairs to the 4th floor, counting doors until she reached 412. No sounds came from within. Naomi knocked twice, paused, then added a third for good measure. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 40s, her dark hair streaked with gray and pulled into a tight bun. She wore a pantsuit that screamed federal agent, right down to the sensible shoes. "You're late," the woman said, stepping aside to let Naomi enter. The room was standard issue, king bed, desk, TV bolted to the wall. What wasn't standard were the files spread across every available surface, the laptop humming on the desk, and the large corkboard covered in photos and red string. Naomi set her bag down. "Who are you?" "Special Agent Mara Vasquez, FBI Anti-Corruption Task Force." Vasquez handed her a coffee. "Shaw said you'd come." Naomi accepted the cup but didn't drink. "He didn't tell me about you." Vasquez smirked. "He wouldn't. We have an understanding." She moved to the corkboard, tapping a photo of the man from the USB drive. Daniel Hargrove, CEO of Hargrove Financial. Not on any of the lists from Reeves' files. But he's been meeting with 3 of Reeves' known associates over the past month. Always in different cities. Always under aliases. Vasquez handed her another photo. Hargrove shaking hands with a man Naomi recognized from the original files. "We think he's picking up where Reeves left off." Naomi studied the images. "Why tell me?" "Because Shaw was right about one thing." Vasquez met her gaze. "Some fights need to be fought outside the system." Naomi set the coffee down. "What do you need?" Vasquez smiled. "Everything you've got." The diner was the kind of place time forgot. Vinyl booths, a jukebox in the corner playing classic rock, coffee that could strip paint. Naomi sat facing the door, her back to the wall. Hargrove entered at exactly 7:15 a.m., just as he had every Tuesday for the past 3 weeks. He took the same booth near the window, ordered the same breakfast, and left the same generous tip. Predictable. Naomi waited until he'd taken 2 bites of his eggs before sliding into the seat across from him. Hargrove froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "This seat's taken." "By me," Naomi said, pushing a photo across the table. Hargrove and his associate at the Denver airport. Hargrove's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened around his fork. "I don't know what you're." "Save it." Naomi kept her voice low. "I know about the shipments. About the girls from Eastern Europe. About the payments you've been making to keep the docks quiet." Hargrove set his fork down carefully. "You have no proof." Naomi smiled. "I don't need it." She stood, leaving him with the photo and a growing sense of unease. Let him sweat. Let him make mistakes. The hunt was on. The warehouse by the dock stank of fish and motor oil. Naomi moved silently through the shadows, her weapon drawn. Voices echoed from the office upstairs. Hargrove and 2 others. Their words sharp with panic. "Everywhere. How did this happen? Does it matter? We need to move the shipment. Now. Naomi climbed the stairs, her footsteps silent on the metal steps. The door burst open before she reached it. Hargrove stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale. Behind him, his associates scrambled for weapons. Naomi didn't give them the chance. When the dust settled, Vasquez found her sitting on the dock outside, watching the sunrise. "It's done," Naomi said. Vasquez nodded. For now. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Naomi stood, brushing the dirt from her jeans. There would always be another fight, and she would be ready.